Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Overcoming the Podcast. Today, I have a special guest with me. Her name is Randina Sheldon, and she is from Randina Rights. And she's going to tell you a little bit more about what she does on that page. It basically is just like some advocacy for positive mental health and trauma survivors. And her and I have connected in multiple ways throughout our time. I think we kind of started around the same time as like business owners in this space and have been talking for a while about making a podcast, and we're coming together and we're doing it. So, Randina, do you want to say hi, share a little bit about you?
Yeah, thanks. My name is Randina Sheldon. I'm an author, a poet, a survivor, and an artist. I utilize Instagram to connect with other survivors and share my writings where I have processed my trauma and abuse. But I also do that through art as well. And it's just been so healing for me to meet other people who like get it, who are going through the same things, and just join the community of people who are healing through these things and learning that they deserve better and more.
Yeah, and that's what I love about our social media spaces is that it connects us, right? In a way that makes us feel so alone in our own lives, and especially like with our families or anyone that we're dealing with. Oftentimes the one who are the loudest and the ones who are recognizing that, hey, this is trauma, are the ones who get the most pushback, right? Are,
So
are
true.
the scapegoats. And so you feel like you're crazy, you feel like you're dramatic, you feel like all of these things that you've been conditioned upon, and then you find other survivors and you're like, oh, I'm not the problem.
Yeah.
Oh, and it's just really powerful community that grows from that. And I think it even like heightens our healing, at least in my experience. And
Definitely.
I love you approached me about the topic for this episode. And at first I was like, what? Think about this because this is one of the ones that I was working through. And then I was like, yeah, because we don't talk about this enough. And we're going to talk about mother wounds. And I actually have not told her this yet. Um, it's actually my mother's birthday as I'm recording this. So it's interesting. I'm like timing is funny.
Mhm.
However, I know I'm at a point where like I feel really comfortable and really okay talking about this topic. And I think we actually tried this before and we had technical issues and then there was some other stuff and we're just like, let's re-record. So
Yeah.
divine timing at play here. And we're gonna talk a little bit about mother wounds. So can you share a little bit about why this topic is so important to you and why you wanted to bring it to our podcast today?
Well, I feel like it's probably the thing I speak on the most because it's, for me, been the biggest part of my story.
Mm,
And I think coming into like Instagram and getting ready to share my story, I was very scared because I honestly felt like my story was so unique and
mm,
rare. But then meeting other people, I realized that actually wasn't the case. And it made me that much more passionate to share my experiences, to share my healing journey, and being able to move through these things so that other people know that they can too. And it's just been like probably the biggest thing on my heart, the biggest message to convey. I feel like because it's just widely seen as moms are so nurturing and loving and supportive and
mm.
safe in our society. And that isn't the case for everyone. And for people who get that constant messaging and are experiencing something different, it makes them feel like it's their fault or that they're
Mhm.
crazy. And just to shine a different light on it and give people a voice to what they're feeling, I think is so important.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And when I it's so funny because I talk about it's funny, but it's not funny. It's coinkydink. I talk about on my podcast and my story, a lot of my earlier story comes from my other parent of how abusive they were, physically, psychologically manipulating, definitely an overt narcissist. And I cut them off like 8 years ago and I'm not looking back, right? Um, However, my relationship with my mother is something that took me a while to see for what it was because I always considered her as the good parent. And there was, as I was discovering this, and this last year, I've been really working on mother wounds and healing my inner child and finding the safety within because there was actually a video that I shared as I was processing this on TikTok that hit 1.1 million views, and so
Wow.
many people in comments in support of, is there a good parent in an abusive household? And so many of us say, well, yeah, this one was totally ideally good for me. They protected me, they whatever. But I argue that if there is an abusive household, it is the responsibility of the adults to protect the child. The child has no ability to do so for themselves. And so when it came to my own mother wounds, my mother was passive and also like emotionally just like jabbed at me. And so I was made to feel like the problem and made small, and also they were enabling the abuse. They were not the ones doing the abuse, but they were allowing it to happen. And
Mhm.
so I have connected with many survivors in this space where that has been the case for them as well. So I'm curious if you relate to anything like that, and more of like where your mother wound kind of goes.
I mean, our stories are pretty similar. In my case, it was my stepdad who was sexually abusing me, but my mom was the enabler. And
Mhm.
it's funny because I didn't really have like an emotional relationship with my stepdad. So there wasn't like this breakdown of like, oh, why is he doing this? I really grew up learning very, very early that um, I was looked at as an object, and I was constantly trying to be I was sought after all the time because even
Yeah.
before I was abused by him, I was sexually assaulted on two different occasions by my grandmother's husband. And so it was my step grandpa technically, but again, I
Yeah.
didn't have that kind of relationship with him. And both of those situations were viewed as like I was being dramatic, I was turning away love. And my grandma, the only reason I feel I don't harbor as much hurt with her for some reason is literally just because she believed me.
Mm.
And whereas with my mother, I know now that I believe she's fully aware of everything that she enabled and that happened. It's just how she acted at the time and made
Mhm.
me feel like I was a liar, I was seeking attention and all these things. But there was still just this underlying need for her approval and her love and her attention. And so I didn't necessarily see her as like the good parent per se, but it just like you said, it took me a really long time to see the full scope of what it really was.
Yeah.
And because there was just so much manipulation on her part of making me feel like I was wrong or I was imagining things. And there was just such a like air of like she just knew better than I did and that
Mhm.
my intuition was wrong. And it just every part of me became kind of broken in that scenario because then I didn't trust myself. I didn't
Yeah.
have self-worth and all of those things. So I relate so much to what you said because on top of her enabling, it still was also that it was the gaslighting, the manipulation, and she was extremely emotionally abusive as well. And it was just
Yes.
always me trying to feel like I was attempting to measure up to what she wanted, but I never could.
Oh.
So,
Okay. I got to repeat that and like highlight that for a second. Attempting to measure up to what she wanted, but never could. Yes. Yes. I think I agree with everything that you said about enabling and that it takes a while to see it. And I think sometimes that what I have found is with the mothers who, and I mean, again, obviously everyone's patterns are different, everyone's families are different. Traditional roles where the father is the caretaker and then the other one is the or is like the provider and then the mother is more of the caretaker and nurturing, and we talk like masculine feminine. Again,
right.
obviously there are other types of relationships, and I'm not
Hmm.
just saying the mother wound is not excluding anyone. It's
Yeah.
just something that we talk about in psychology, so it's just a known studied thing. And so the parent who you are expected to get the nurturing and the love and the emotional connection from, when you don't get that, that really messes with you, because like you said, it's like, is there something wrong with me? Did I do this? They have these standards in their head that you have to meet, but really you're looking for emotional connection. And
Hmm.
I recognized later that like my mom has always been shut down emotionally. Whenever I bring anything up about my trauma, she dismisses it and says it wasn't a thing. She's like, well, I provided for you. I did this. I did that, whatever. Like, you went to all of your acting lessons. I made sure you got to school. I did for you. I provided for you. I was very in this do. But I needed safety. I needed protection. I needed connection in a household that was abusive. And I had, after I ended up, so I went no contact with my mother. And I always haven't been liked by my mom. I'm very different, to be honest. She's very stoic and calm, and we don't have emotions, and we act like things aren't a big deal, and we don't talk about things, and I'm just to myself and I brood. And then when I'm upset, I whisper at you, and it's terrifying, right? I obviously, anyone who knows me, I'm very dynamic. I'm very emotional. I'm very expressive. I will speak my mind now, especially as I've been healing and growing. Whereas when I was in the presence of my mother, it was the pick. Oh, you're so this. Oh, you're too big. Whatever it is, it's just, I'm going to pick at you. I'm going to bring down your self esteem. And I think it was subconsciously because she felt miserable about herself and doesn't know
Yeah.
how to connect, that she's like, I'm just going to control. And maybe it's from a way of I'm protecting you, but I'm going to pick at everything about you. And I found myself getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller to the point
Mhm.
where I had some freedom and I came back to live with her after grad school when I was studying for my boards. And I went into this deep depression. Like, I had no energy. I was like, had like a flat affect, no expression on my face. I didn't feel motivated to do anything. And my mom even noticed it. She's like, what's up with you? What's wrong with you? And I'm like, nothing. And it was because my mother and my brother, who are very similar, just ganged up on me on how dramatic and annoying and all of these things that I am. When I spent 3 years in grad school discovering and loving myself, to then come back into this environment of, and that's when I realized how toxic it's always been. And it was a
Mhm.
really harsh awakening. And I wasn't ready to go no contact with my family at the time. I wanted to heal. I wanted to grow. I wanted to say, hey, this is happening. And they weren't up for it. So I ended up separating. And so in the last year, I've done a lot of mother wound healing because I've been away from that and realizing how much of an impact that had. So it's quite a journey with that. And I think it's really shameful because, especially as a woman who really would love to learn how to be nurturing and caring and empathetic and all of those things that I really needed from my mom. She was never that. She was so disconnected and cold and honestly didn't want much to do with me. And
Mhm.
I think that's how she's been her whole life because of her own stuff. It makes sense, but
Yeah.
it's hard. It impacts you as
Mhm.
the child. So I get that very much.
Yeah.
And the not believing you part is also like, it's their way of coping, right?
Mhm.
Like, it really, it's a denial. If they don't want to see it, you're being a mirror, then what are they going to do? They're going to blame you, right? And like you said, it's like you lose your own trust, and that's so hard.
Mhm. I'm so sorry for what you went through,
Yeah.
and I relate to so much. I think you see, like you said, there's different dynamics. I think there's also different ways this can present itself, which is why it's so important for each person to share their story in whatever way feels right for them, because it doesn't just look one way. And
Mm-mm.
um like you said, your mom was like constantly saying, "Look, I'm doing all these things for you." Whereas it was very opposite for me. Like, I was very sheltered and I wasn't allowed to do a lot. And it was always under the guise of, "Well, you're going to quit anyways. Well, you're
Mm.
not going to make the team anyways. You
Yeah.
know what? I'm just going to get you this instrument and you're going to quit." It was just this constant messaging of you're not enough and you can't do it and all of these things all the time to try and keep me
Mm.
small. And I relate so much to what you said about being different, because I was the same way. Just I was
Mm.
everything that she expressed that she didn't like. I was outspoken and I was unique, and I had different goals when it came to like career and everything. And she would just always say things like, "I love you, but I don't like you."
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, and just so many things like that, comments like that. And
Mm.
yeah, same thing too, like you said about like talking about, what you look like, your weight, how annoying you are, how like I got so many comments about being too talkative and being too loud, and
Mhm.
those are still triggering for me sometimes. Like, I have a really loud laugh, and like, it's something that I like felt like I had to diminish for a long time, and just
Mhm.
just pretty much anything that she ever made a comment about, that was like my understanding of myself and those ways in my
Yes.
lens. And yeah, and also, just like you said, it destroying your sense of self and it destroying your intuition, that just
Mhm.
it I actually felt like I, as a child, had an extremely strong sense of intuition and felt like I constantly had, like, visions and dreams and, like,
Yep, me
premonitions
too.
and things. I was very in tune with things, it's very in tune with, like, people and energy and things
Mhm.
like that, and then that situation, it just made me question everything, because even if you can see clearly that this person is denying your reality, you are still a child and you still need things from them. This is still an environment that you were developing in and you were learning in, and you can't
Yeah.
help but take on the the things that you were learning, and they literally become a part of you. And
Mhm.
it's it makes me so upset when people say, why can't you just get over it? This is
'Cause
literally
it's not that
brain.
easy.
Yeah,
Ugh.
it's literally ingrained in
Mhm.
who we've become, and it takes a lot of unlearning and it takes a lot of time. And it was a similar situation of just being able to see what the situation really was, like taking time to like grow my own life as an adult and experience things. And it wasn't so much of a going away, but me and my mother, we broke contact several times because I think
Mhm.
I would just like I would try and just be that version that she wanted me to be, but I would literally anytime after spending time with her just come home and just bawl because I had to just let it out. Like, I felt like I just
Yep.
held it in and was like this. I was quiet and I was agreeable and I was all of these things, and then I just had to literally just pour it out of me every time after I came home. It was so painful, and it and
Mhm.
I think it's just hard because so many people have asked me, "Well, how did you get there?" And it's hard because it's just a million little moments of like, "This isn't okay," and choosing
Yep.
yourself and seeing,
Mhm.
like, "Okay, I would rather feel this way than this way." And it's a process that every person has to go through. It's not just this, like, "Okay, do this, this, and this." Like, you can say, you can tell people, like, that they're worthy and that they don't deserve these things and the signs of abuse, but when it's family, it's so much harder to pull away from and um like gain yourself back. That takes time. There's
Yeah.
just You could follow these steps, but it literally takes time because it's you having to process it and work through it, because it was just years of me trying to have that mother-daughter relationship, years of me seeing and waiting and hoping that she would see me and she would love me, and years of
Yeah.
me also abandoning myself and
Yeah.
feeling the pain that that caused, and not wanting to live like that anymore, just finally getting to that point. And there was
Yep.
no one thing that got me there. There were some things that definitely pushed it along. I feel like one of the biggest things was when I had my own child, because I felt that love and it just deepened that hurt that much more of like, how could she do this?
Yeah,
And
like that perspective of this was always there, this was always right in front, like that's how you treated this little innocent thing, like that's what you
yeah.
saw as this beautiful little baby grows into the world and starts becoming an individual and you just automatically want to just make it small and tell it it's not
Mhm.
enough and criticize and it's like how miserable and how hurt do you have to be to do that? Right?
Yeah.
It's like that, I don't have kids myself, but I work with kids and I see that and I'm like, how could you take this little innocent thing that is having a hard time being a child? And I can't imagine telling a child half the things that I've been told. Like, I cannot imagine, let alone
Mhm.
your child.
Yeah.
And, I think it's easy for us to get lost in the why and the how could they. And I think that's
Yeah.
one of the processing points for us, right?
Definitely.
And my therapist in many instances has been like, "You don't understand why or how. because you could never do that. That is not you. You are not meant to understand. And if you get hung up on trying to understand, you're going to stunt your ability to move forward because
Yes.
it is not the why that matters. It's that it happened and this is the ramifications of this. So, how are you
Mm-hmm.
going to deal with this? How are you going to cope? Right. And so, I love what you've been saying about like people don't understand the little stuff. Like, how, well, why can't you just get over it? Why isn't it a thing? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's your mom, just move on. Like, you only have one mom. Like, all of that
Yeah.
stuff and all of that stigma is so much more harmful. And I
Mm-hmm.
think when we talk about these wounds with our parents, and especially when we open up about childhood trauma, it's always, but they're your parent. How could you treat them that way? And the narrative, very few, like very rarely goes to, but they're your child. How could you do that to your child? It's the blame on the children.
Mm-hmm.
Why? What
Yeah.
what control did we have back then? It is the adult. It is the adult whose responsibility it is to learn how to manage their emotions. It is the adult's responsibility to learn how to break these trauma patterns. If they've been abused, if they've been dealing with stuff, you can have compassion for that. But it is not okay for an adult to carry that on to the next stage. It is
Mm-hmm.
your responsibility to heal and do the work. And when you don't, you pass that on to your kids. Right. And so I do the work now for my future children. I work
Mm-hmm.
as hard as I do now for my future children. My parents are not in my life for my future children because they will not have the same kind of upbringing as I did. Right. And so I love that you are seeing things different for your child because that shows how capable you are and how strong you are in order to do the work to do that. Right? You're acting out of love and softness when you could have been hard and continued on this cycle that you've been dealt.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that you're proud of that and recognize, like, for anyone who has kids or like, I'm just doing the best I can, it's really hard. You're working on it. You
Yeah.
didn't. You
Mm-hmm.
are. That's the difference. And so anyone listening who is also a parent, I just commend them on that. Sorry, a little tangent. I was just like, so good. So good.
Yeah, I know, have met through this community several other parents, and the challenges are different for everyone. I think for some reason it's easier than others. For others, like getting to that point of being different than their parents, it's really like it feels like you either go one of two ways after a situation like this. I feel like you become it, and then you might see it and then you have to unbecome it, or you just choose that life, in some sense or another, that's the path you take, or you literally are just like a- absolutely against anything that's remotely like them and you go the opposite way. And that was more me.
Mm-hmm.
And I have seen people who have struggled, like, I don't know how to be emotional with my children, like I just didn't get that. And I have seen a lot of people say they have a hard time giving what they didn't get.
Mm-hmm.
And I honestly can't relate to that. But I feel for the struggle because I can see wholeheartedly where it comes from.
Yeah.
And I can imagine, that's the thing, each person's different, how it affects each person is different, the trauma, the triggers, all of it is going to look different, but it's all extremely valid. And for
Mm-hmm.
me, it's just so early on, I was just like, I don't want to repeat this, I don't want to be this. Like, I still struggle with any little thing that pops up as I've gotten older that reminds me of her.
Yeah,
And
me too.
it's just I've struggled a lot with like, obviously, I through the years and stuff, I gained enough self-worth and desire just for something else to be able to go no contact for good. um but I have struggled so much with learning how to love the parts of me that reflect even a little bit of her.
Me too.
That has been a huge
Mm-hmm.
struggle for me because I'm just like, it's that fear of being like her, and not even in the abusive sense, just being like her at all,
Yeah.
not wanting to. And
Mm-hmm.
so just any way that this presents itself, it's not like we're crying about it and we're stuck in the past. It's literally we were formed in those environments.
Yep.
but at the same time, like you said, we should be proud of the progress we have made, because that's another thing beyond just speaking on the mother wound that I'm so passionate about, is that we can overcome. And maybe it will never be, we can never be fully healed, and it will never be fully gone. Like
Mm-hmm.
it just can't be, but we can live outside of just being defined by it, and we can live a
Yep.
life that is just full of joy and peace.
Absolutely. And it just takes us choosing ourselves and learning about trauma, learning about the wounds, understanding, doing the work, figuring out the communities, the education, the books, the all the things. It's like the journey is there
Mhm.
for us. We have to choose it. And I like the way I think about healing is that healing is simple. It's not easy. The steps themselves are simplistic, right?
Yeah.
Coping skill, separate, boundaries, whatever. But the meaning and how deeply ingrained all of this stuff is makes it excruciating,
Mhm.
right? And so it really is. And I think people look at people like you and I who are sharing our stories and are maybe farther along in our healing journey, maybe are no contact and more at peace with it. And there are people who are in the depths of it and just struggling and like, I don't even know how to get there. I don't even know how to start. All I know is that I just can't do this anymore. And for those people, it's like you are in the right place. There is no specific guidebook. There is not this same exact plan for everyone. Not the same thing is going to work. There's all kinds of things that I would say healing is getting back to yourself and figuring out intuitively what you need, who you are, where you are able to take steps forward, right? Like
Yes.
it's about you because in both of our situations, our mothers took away our identity. They made us feel small. They shamed us that those parts that are not accepted and loved and embraced were hidden. And, and when we did show them, they were criticized and we were made to feel horrible about ourselves. My core wound between both of my parents is I am crazy. I don't like that word, but that was put in my mind so many times because I do have an intuition. I used to see things. Like I have always had this strong connection to like the world around me. I was a little goofball. I've probably had ADHD since I was a kid, which was annoying and out of place and not diagnosed. So all of these things are just like, oh, why are you like this? And
Mhm.
disgusted of my personality was
Yeah.
being different. And so when that's not accepted, you learn how to mask and you learn how to be a chameleon and you learn how to people please in order to get the love and affection that you so deeply crave. And then you chase that in relationships, right? And then you question your own sanity and who you are and you're the problem and spiral, 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 spiral. But it comes down to whether you were supported and seen and heard and your parents had the tools to support you emotionally, physically, all of the things, or they
Mm.
didn't.
Mhm.
And that's what we're left with. And it's a really hard reality. And it makes it even harder when they're in denial and they're blaming us for everything and, saying that we're crazy for whatever happened and we're making things up and it's not traumatic. And it just adds on the layers, right? And
Yes.
so I think just as important to just recognize that, like, I went through something hard. This changed me. And we were talking about earlier about all of the small things and little pieces that people don't understand. That's
Mhm.
complex trauma. Growing
Yeah.
up in an environment like that, where you're constantly stressed, where you're constantly in survival mode, where you're constantly feeling unsafe, physically, emotionally, or otherwise, it changes the way your brain develops.
Mhm.
So it is not your fault. You cannot just get over it because you are now different because of this. And that's a hard reality, but it's not a
Mhm.
death sentence.
Yeah.
So I love that we can have these conversations because I think that it is incredibly, incredibly important to remind people no matter what stage you're in, just keep taking steps and it's
Yeah.
okay. And
Mhm.
I want to transition into one of the areas that I know we both have struggled with, and I know is very common with the mother wound, and that is body image. So I know you shared a little bit about body image being impacted. Talked about, I'm not a number on the scale, all of those things. I've seen those posts from you before. Can you share a little bit about that aspect of overcoming for you in regard to dealing with your mother?
Um, I would say the messaging was definitely always there. And the thing that was always so interesting to me was that she was, a plus size woman my whole childhood. And I was very in tune with the fact that she struggled with her own body image. And like you said, we like later on can see it's a lot of projecting, right? That things they're not willing to deal with or face or whatever. Now we are basically being punished for those things. And now it's
Mm-hmm.
almost like you don't get to feel free in this area because I'm not free in this area. So now let me, put this on your radar so you can worry about it too,
Mm-hmm.
And I think
Mm-hmm.
it's a little bit of both, like, because just with anything, this, but also many other things, my mom would make me feel bad if I had something that she didn't. She would just always say, I didn't
Mm-hmm.
have that. And so you shouldn't either. And so I actually didn't really have any body issues. It was more like there was just constant like comments made all the time. Like even as a teenager, I was um pretty skinny, pretty much like a rail, because
Mm-hmm.
my dad is. And but there was still like I was still turning into a woman. My thighs touched and I had like I was kind of curvy and stuff, even though I was
Mm-hmm.
still like skinny, I guess, in
Yeah.
regards to whatever standards.
Mm-hmm.
um Wore a size 5 but my thighs touched, whatever.
Yeah.
And there was this like just moments I still remember, and they don't hurt anymore, but they're just there. Just
Mm-hmm.
even for my 16th birthday, I wanted to have a party at the beach with my friends. And she made sure that I felt like I should wear at least a one piece because my body, like, it was so many things. And I just look at those pictures now, and I was like kind of just standing with my arms in front of me, and you could just tell I was uncomfortable. And it
Yeah.
just took the fun out of it, because even at that age I wasn't really thinking about that stuff. But anytime there was a change in my body, it was made into this big shameful thing. Like when I needed a bra, it wasn't about being there for me as a mother. And in a moment of me developing and changing, it was like, you're disgusting, you need to cover up, making me
Yeah.
feel shame and bad. Even when I got my period, it was like this huge deal of making me
Mm.
feel disgusting and shameful, like somehow it was my fault. And it became this very taboo thing. Everything was very taboo. And um then going into like my early 20s, um like when I was still in contact with her, and it was still in that time of my life where it's like I wanted her around, and I was willing to just kind of do what I had to do to keep that, and like
Yeah.
look for some semblance of like that connection, going shopping together, or getting,
Mm-hmm.
pedicures together and stuff, even though the whole time it would be miserable, you
Mm-hmm.
know so we would go shopping, and it would constantly be like, that doesn't fit your body type, and that looks terrible on you, and that's too tight. And that by this point I had gained weight. I started to manifest a lot of health problems, which I feel are completely and directly attributed to the trauma, well, drama too, but that I endured as a child, because they just started immediately. And I from some of those I started to gain weight, and now I've been plus size as an adult. But um I more struggled with just like this, like, pursuit of losing the weight, because it's like, right, that's what you're supposed to do, right? You shouldn't be plus size, that's unhealthy, that's promoting obesity, that's wrong. And it was this thing more in my mind of like, well, I got to lose weight because obviously I can't stay this way.
Mm-hmm.
But I thankfully, I honestly don't know, but somehow I never got to a point of necessarily hating my body, or like finding it disgusting. There, um, I felt like shy. I felt kind of maybe
Mm-hmm.
ashamed, even, and embarrassed.
Yeah.
But I feel just honestly like protected. that certain things I feel didn't make as deep of an impact as they could have, because
Mm-hmm.
I think again it comes back to that wanting to do the opposite. I had a lot of compassion for myself, and
Yeah.
just as I grew, um came to understand how much, she was projecting, and um I just had this appreciation and love for people of all sizes, and didn't feel that there was this goal of how you should look or what you should be. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just in growing from what I saw, from what I experienced, it gave me that much more motivation to accept myself.
Yeah.
And I definitely want to touch on this further in, the conversation, but coming back to, I feel like one of the biggest pieces of moving through the mother wound is learning how to love yourself.
I love that. And you know what? I agree. And I think that that's one of the things that gets taken from you, right? And like for me, it's I think body image was one of the things that was taken from me because my mother was she also is plus size, and she from what I was told when she had me, she was like I am a size 12, curvy, but like I would be considered like mid-size, you know what I mean? um and she was comfortable and she seemed to love herself and that kind of thing. And then she had kids and then she just let herself go. She didn't want to take care of herself. It just kind of became this like blah. And so she just gained weight, and every child she gained more weight and gained more weight to the point where she was really not happy with who she was. And by the time I was always known as the skinny one. Like growing up as a
Mhm,
child, like I was this long, lanky thing. Like I was always tall and I always had like I was like bony and just like I didn't have any fat, and then puberty hit and a little bit, but like I was the skinny one, and that was my identity. I was the skinny smart one.
mhm,
That's how I was known. So because I'm the skinny smart one, I must always be the skinny smart one, right? And
mhm,
so as I got older and the trauma and all the things that happened for me, a heavy amount of trauma happened when I was like 15, 16. And I remember going from starting off at a 00 at the beginning of high school to then a size 5 as like puberty kicked in a little bit, having curves, but definitely still skinny. And I remember being criticized about that when that happened. Same kind of thing as you, talking about a swimsuit. You shouldn't be doing this, blah, blah, blah. And
mhm.
then during that trauma, I coped by eating so much, just comfort foods of whatever. And so I
Yeah,
would come home and I would just throw myself into sweets. I would throw my anything. Like I was just constantly eating. It made me feel good. It was the only thing in my house at the time that like give me comfort, right? I didn't recognize it, but looking back now, it was like food equals comfort. We have bad
yeah,
feelings, we eat food. We have good feelings, we celebrate with food. Like that's just kind of how it was for me.
mhm.
And I went from a size 5 to a size 17 from
Wow.
15 to the end of 16, almost 17 years old. And then my senior year was criticized so much for how much I had gained weight and you're disgusting and all of these things and making comments about my body consistently from both parents. Then my mom went on this diet that is not approved, basically like got these injections from overseas that you shoot them into your stomach, and it's basically a hormone that helps you just like drop weight like crazy, but it's not safe. And you basically go on a starvation diet, but I didn't know anything about it. It's like 500 calories a day. You couldn't even have certain lotions because it would absorb in your skin and hold whatever. I was like the weirdest thing, super restrictive diet, and I did it and I dropped weight like that. And my mom did it first, and at first she was like, "No, you shouldn't do this," but she was just like so happy, and I begged her. I was like, "Please, please, please let me do this." And so she did. And I got into this addiction of this thing. I did more cycles than was healthy and that was advised. And it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't something that was through a doctor. I literally was sitting there. I took a little needle and injected myself in my stomach every day and came to school with an apple every day. And that was my lunch. And then I would come home and have raw chicken and a little bit of strawberries, and that was it. Maybe some cottage cheese as a treat and a little small portion. Of course, I dropped weight. I was starving myself. But I was rewarded for that. Wow, you look so good. Look at you. Like, not only from my mother, but the world around me, right?
Mhm.
And then, I stopped doing that. I recognized I grew up into adult and I was like, that's not healthy. That's not okay. And I gained weight again. And in my early 20s, I I was back up to this like size 17 and my face was puffy and like I just was like inflamed all over. And at that point, I am fairly sure I had my thyroid disease and just didn't know about it yet. So like it didn't matter what I did, whatever exercise, whatever, I just couldn't lose the weight.
Yeah.
And I remember I came home from college one time and I saw my mom and it wasn't a high, it wasn't anything. She just goes, "Baby, your ass is getting fat. What are you doing?" And I was like, "Hi, nice to see you. Like, I'm glad that that is the first thing you see and call out in me, right?" And so, but it was in such a criticizing way that was like, "You're gross." But I'm
Mm,
like, do you look in the mirror? Like, and also I'm like, and I don't think any less of you because of this. I care about your health, but you care about how I look. You care, you know what I mean? And just telling me
yeah.
that that's not okay. And so between that and my body being sexualized and from my father and all of these things, like I just finally, when I was in college, I remember I felt so gross and disgusting that I would only hang out with my close friends and they wanted to go to a party. I remember there's this Halloween party they're begging me to go to. And I was like, I really don't feel comfortable. I'm just like gross and like whatever. I probably was around the same size I am now. And I was just like, everyone is so tiny and I'm just this giant and I'm just fat and I'm just, I can't do this. And I remember the first couple parties I didn't go to and they begged me to come on Halloween and I was just like this the whole time and I was like so uncomfortable. I would make comments about my weight to people because I was so uncomfortable. Like if I mention it first, then they don't have to say
Yeah.
anything, but they don't have to think it. So I made people uncomfortable. People didn't understand why I like hid from the world because I was so ashamed and felt so gross to be in the body that I was in that that was a huge thing for me. And I've been a yo-yo weight wise for a majority of my life. I have a thyroid disease. My metabolism goes up and down. One small change for me
Mm,
and it happens, right? And so it took a while for me to like love myself and accept myself as into who I am. And now I'm like 170 pounds. I'm 5'10. I have a size 12 and like that's maybe considered average, but some people would see that as bigger. Some people
yeah.
would see that as you're not the beauty standard, you're not the norm. And like, I don't care anymore. Even if I gain weight, it's like, it's about feeling healthy, not
Yeah.
about how you look. But
Mm-hmm.
growing up in a narcissistic household from both parents, I got the thing that how you look is the most important thing about you. The appearance is more important
Yeah.
than what's within of even how you behave or how you act or how you whatever. And so I think
Very.
that was a huge limiter in my self-love journey. And
Mm,
that always held me back. I was like, physically, I am gross. Physically, I am gross. So I think we can transition a little bit into talking about loving yourself and this self-love journey because I think so much of it ties together. Um, when you're talking about learning to love yourself, what were some of the steps that you had to take? Like what were some of the obstacles that you were overcoming for you that kind of supported your healing?
I think some of the things that were huge for me were, um, one, just even going through like the whole situation with my mom not believing me
Mm,
or whatever, not accepting, my version of things or whatever, and knowing like that feeling was not going away. That
mhm,
feeling was there, and the more validity I gave it, it is just all of these little things started to grow. My belief in myself, and my desire for better, because I started to see that I deserved better. And it's so hard to really like explain all the tiny little things that you do over the years.
mhm,
um but I think it was just really like getting to that place of like finally accepting, like, okay, this happened. Like it was no longer like I was going along with her narrative of everything, and like pretending that that didn't happen. Like we'd get together and we were just this happy family, and just none of that happened, and I was just
mhm,
to tuck it away. When I finally got to the point of like, no, I'm going to live this truth now. And it wasn't like I'm just putting on this identity, but it was just, it literally felt like I was opening a door in a
mhm,
sense where I didn't have to hide so much, but I still felt very hidden still, but it was more mentally,
Mhm.
like, I was doing this for myself, and once I did that, I it just changed so much because then, even if I wasn't having those conversations with her and I wasn't trying to work it through, which I did approach that a few times throughout the years, but it just always was dismissed, like you said.
Mhm.
Um, and I would just kind of find, okay, well, I'm not going to get that. I just started feeling like I was slowly but surely in very small ways giving those things to myself. And I feel like that is one
Yes.
of the biggest things to overcoming mother wounds is starting to give those things to yourself, and just first of all giving
Mhm.
myself the belief, giving myself the space to be like, this is how it made me feel, even if no one else agrees, even if no one else sees it this way, even if my mother herself cannot acknowledge what she did, I am going to acknowledge it,
Yes.
and I am going to put down the weight of carrying all of that and also hiding all of it. And
Mhm.
it was many years of, I feel like, going through that, and it was a very private time for me. I lost pretty much any friends that I had left from, like, my early 20s. I was
Yeah.
getting diagnosed with more and more health things. It
Mhm.
was a very, very hard time for me, and it was very I was very isolated, I felt like, but it was
Yeah.
probably the biggest, like, leaps in my healing journey that I made, because it was just a time where I felt like
Mhm.
I it's like I got to take advantage of that solitude and really just focus on myself and
Yeah.
not be so distracted necessarily with relationships around me.
Mhm.
Um, because I did end up losing a lot of those friendships simply because I was so clingy. I was so needy. I was constantly like, love me, love me, love me, pay attention to me, because I wasn't getting that. And I finally was like, it just seems like a weird thing to say, but it literally just felt like one day I just woke up and I realized, okay, I am the problem. It's
Mm.
not everyone else. It's not that
Mhm.
they're being an asshole. It's not that they don't really care about me, and not that a lot of those relationships were perfect, but it was me operating out of my wounding. And it was just finally when I was able to, like, truly look at that
Yeah.
is when I could really start choosing myself. And it really
Mhm.
just started there, but it just really happened over a million moments, and I still had contact with my mom on and off throughout those years, because I think it's just like it takes time to fully pull away, and you kind of
It does.
like,
So
because you're
hard.
learning how to not gaslight yourself.
Yeah.
You're
It's
you're
so
you're
hard.
learning how to not treat yourself the same way that they did
Mhm.
and diminish your feelings, and it's just all of those tiny little things that take time. And I do feel like, um I can't take all the credit, because I think a huge part of finding the strength to love myself and just finding even the ability, like, that was possible, was my husband. And so I know not everyone can necessarily just boom hop into a healthy relationship, and
Yeah.
I'm not saying it fixes everything, because it's definitely, we've had our challenges. Um,
Mhm.
but having someone come into my life and love me in all the ways that my mom told me someone couldn't or wouldn't,
Mhm.
it changed so much, because she would tell me things like early on in our relationship, like, make sure you wake up in the morning and you put makeup on before he does, or he'll leave you. And just different, it was always things like that, like these stupid
Mhm.
things. And
Yeah.
make sure you're constantly shaving your legs, and make sure you're doing this and that, and make sure
Mhm.
you keep the house clean, be the perfect little obedient wife. And that just
Conditional
wasn't.
love, like
Yes,
mhm.
right, that none of that was me. And
Yeah.
it's through this relationship that I have found, like, I just feel so blessed, because I honestly feel like after everything I've gone through and everything I've lost, like, I feel like my husband and my child have been the biggest blessings that I have been given in place of what I have lost, because it
Yeah.
is the most truest, realest love, and I can be absolutely myself in every way. And he has accepted me, he has supported me, he has just loved me in such a real, like, way, like in such a deep way. And he also came from an abusive household. So for us, I feel to overcome that and to find each other and
Mhm.
have a healthy relationship is huge.
Love
And
that.
so it has been a huge thing for me because it gave me the confidence, it gave me the support
Mhm.
to do that. And so it's not just me, but I still feel like anyone, like, once you start listening to those little nudgings like that don't go away of like this happened,
Yeah.
like you start leaning into that, that is just it's where it busts wide open.
Yep. It's that awareness. You get to a point where you can't ignore it. You start seeing the things that are toxic. You start seeing things that don't fit. You start questioning how they're acting, right? And like the thing about being in the dysfunctional family is it seems normal until you get out of it and you recognize what is actually functional. And then you're brought back into it and they're all protecting themselves and you say anything and they're pushing you out and you're the scapegoat and you're the problem and you're dramatic and you're all of these things. But if you look back, at least I know in my experience, there have been people in adults in my early life who saw from the beginning that my mom's side of the family was toxic and the other side of the family was toxic. And they wanted to help me because it was always the sides of the family were fighting against each other.
Mhm.
And it's like both sides are not healthy for
Yeah.
this child and these children, because I have siblings too. It's like
Mhm.
I've had people who have been there like, "We've been close to you because we've seen it." It's not just the big, overt, in your face abuser. There are so many things on both sides that are unhealthy that are really damaging to you. And I didn't see it till I was older, right? But like once, like you said, it was like a door opening. Once that door opens, you step through and it's like you're getting started in a whole new life. It's like you're finally on this path of undiscovering all of the stuff that held you back. It's like pulling back all of those things that are not you. That is the guys, that is the trauma responses. And you start stepping into who am I? What is self love? What is this? And I love that you have found that family that is like that replacement for you. Like a not full replacement because we can never fully replace, but it is just like this gift that you have been given to help you solidify your own self love and also
Mhm.
what love could and should be, right?
Yeah.
And I know personally I've been in the period of alone. This has been my period of isolation, deep healing, cutting off my mom fully for years. It does take time. I think I started in my early 20s and I went through a period a year and a half, 2 years ago where I did stayed for like a few months, but like this is it. This is done. And I think
Yeah.
we all know that. Um
Mhm.
and as I've just gone into a deeper level of inner child healing because I finally feel safe. And so I'm going back on all these things that were repressed and these sides of me and the inner teen who didn't really get their rebellion stage because they had to be perfect little angels so they didn't get in trouble and all of these things. And so it's like all of these parts are showing up and just wanting to be seen and wanting to be heard and I'm just letting them, because it's the voice in your head that comes up and that's like the mom. It's like, oh, you shouldn't be doing that, you don't do this.
Yeah.
And you switch from them saying that to that was wrong, I get to do what I want. And like you said earlier, like I'm giving myself what I wish I had. And that's really in small pieces what I started doing. And the ability for it to break open was the safety in my relationship and in my environment, which then allowed me to have safety within myself and in my body. And that
Mhm.
just broke everything open for me and catapulted the ability to start this. But I think for me, inner child work was so important. It was going back to those times where I felt abandoned or I was the problem and looking back with my adult brain and my compassionate heart and saying, no, that's not your fault. So
Yes.
what are we going to do to help you work through that? Because
Mhm.
it's hard, it happened, but it's not you.
Mhm.
So how are we going to find that, And then you get to this point of freedom. Like it wasn't me. I'm freaking goofy and weird and whatever. And like, I love it about myself. And, the things that weren't aligned and all that stuff, like, it's out. I'm at the point where like everything is empty. The universe can come fill for me. And I know that's coming in this next chapter. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
what doesn't align is done. I finally figured out who I am and where I'm going. And of course, there'll still be pieces. And I know when I get into a relationship that's safe and all of those things, there's going to be stuff that shows up. I know that in friendships, the mother wound came up because I didn't trust women and I didn't realize until I got in these relationships and I'm like, oh. I assume the worst. I assume everyone is judging me. I assume that you all think I'm crazy and at some point you're just going to get rid of me, right? Like I had rotating friendships. And it's a
Yeah.
huge insecurity of my adulthood. Like right? And so that's the mother wound. I I got too close. Anyone who kind of gave me what I thought a mother should, anyone who is a middle-aged woman who would be around the age of what my mom would be, even as a teenager, I would be like, we're friends. But I wasn't looking for a friend. I was looking for a mom. But I didn't realize that. But I still have people who like cheer me on like that in my life who I can
Hmm.
and I like told one of them, I was like, you're like a mom to me. Is that okay? And then I realized I'm like, I'm not that close to them. It's just the idea of what I wish it
Hmm.
was, right? So like I
Yeah.
would project like relationships and like the different level of expectation onto things.
Yeah.
Not healthy because I'm like,
Hmm.
be my mommy, but I didn't realize what it was. So it's like, oh, high boundaries. That's really like I could see how that's a lot for another adult human being, right? So it's just so interesting how it all plays out. But like you said, I don't think it's all over, but how much progress can be made when we start finding ourselves, loving ourselves, and then figuring out what's makes sense and fits with us, right? So
Yeah. It
yeah.
is so much. Like you said, there's so many layers to peel back, and I don't think it ends because you're always, even some things that I felt like I had moved through, I can even years later look back and see it in a whole new light and
Mm-hmm.
now process a different aspect of it.
Yep.
And like it really is just those small moments of choosing yourself and giving things to yourself. And because during those years of like I was like, oh, I it's like I felt that desire to like end everything with her, but it was just that fear of like
Mm-hmm.
um and that need of her being there. Like what does
Mm-hmm.
it mean if I can't have a relationship with her, because there was so much shame put on me for the times that we did break contact, and it was always my fault.
Yes. That's what I was gonna
All
ask. Is the guilt and the
the
shame external too? Mm-hmm.
Yes, yes, very much so. And
Yeah.
um, that it would just like I would get literally stuck. Like I was afraid to make a decision either way
Mm-hmm.
because I would just feel afraid of the unknown, and it was almost like easier to stay in what I knew even though it really sucked. And
Yeah.
um but it was just pushing through those things and trusting that desire for more, that was there for a reason. And that it wasn't like vindictive or selfish, or that it wasn't being done out of spite or anything. It was literally just me acknowledging that my feelings matter too,
Yeah.
and that my experience is valid. And um I really just feel that obviously I can't be my own mother. I can't have that relationship, but the relationship I have with myself is enough, and it is sufficient. And it's
Yeah.
like the love and the care and the belief and, cheering myself on, all of those things, because I
Mm-hmm.
was so stuck in this idea that I was unlovable because my mother couldn't love me. I'm like, if she
Yep.
can't, how can anyone? And I, like you said with the friends thing, I struggled with that a lot. I still do. It's
Yep.
very hard for me, even just like going through, like coming online and sharing my story publicly and connecting with people. It's actually brought up a lot of things that have been very unexpected, like
Mm-hmm.
people getting close to me, like women specifically. And I've prayed for these connections. I have gone through this long period of loneliness and isolation and
Mm-hmm.
not having these relationships, and now they're coming, and I'm like, whoa, wait a second, like I'm actually very uncomfortable. And it's like I- I'm starting to discover that now, of like, did the
Mm-hmm.
lack of intimacy with my mother make it hard for me to have this intimacy and this closeness with other women? And
Mm-hmm.
like you said with your mom, very emotionally turned off. My mom was the same way, and it's like
Yeah.
if I would get excited about something or upset about something, it was just, oh my god, you're so dramatic and ridiculous, and
Mm-hmm.
everything was always like,
Yep.
you're so over the top. And so like having these emotional connections and having this closeness, it has brought up a lot of like triggers and fears I didn't even realize I had.
Mm-hmm.
And realizing, and also having that just the trust issues, but having that like fear that they're not really there for the right reasons, and
Yeah. Like, what's the motive here? What are you
right.
gonna take from me? Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, I have struggled with that so much, and it's been so wild because I have like,
Yeah.
not every connection is gonna pan out and be what you hope, but I have
Mm-mm.
actually made some really, what I consider now, close friends in the
Mm-hmm.
last year, and it's been
Yeah.
crazy, and it's been what I prayed for, but then I'm like, at the same time, like, I feel so awkward. Like, can't I just be friends with this woman and not make it this huge thing in my head? Like, what is
Yeah.
wrong with me? It's
Mm-hmm.
so weird. And I'm like, I can only, it's like I had friends as a teenager and stuff, but then I took this long period of time where I literally feel like I'm a different person now than I was
Yep.
then. And so
Yep.
to reconcile the two and
Mm-hmm.
like be friends now and not be super awkward and
Yep.
like
I
it's been
totally
hard. So
feel you.
your videos that you've been sharing, I've been like, okay, I feel seen.
It's so hard and shameful to talk about, right? Like friendship as an adult. Like that's one of the things I've been talking about, adulty adult. I feel like I should be an adulty adult. I'm turning 30.
Yeah,
And like I still struggle so much. I'm like, what is going on that like this is the thing? And I realized my
yeah,
pattern and I realized that I expect people to just share all of them and all of their stuff so I know they're trustworthy right off the bat, which is not healthy. But
yeah,
if they don't, then I immediately don't feel comfortable. So I put up my mask. So I put up my, I come out, I have like RBF. I'm tall. I've been told I'm intimidating. I just get really quiet. I know people who are online are like, you quiet. Yes, I get very quiet. I get very stoic. I will in a crowd of people, I will stand off to the side unless someone approaches me. I will not talk to them because I am silently judging them to decide if they're worth my time and if they're safe. But we were talking about like those moments that I'm like my mother. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I sit there and judge people like my mom. Whether it's for
mm,
safety or not, I just sit there and I'm so judgmental. You're good enough
mm,
for me. You're not. I don't know about you. You probably have an ulterior motive, whatever." And even though for me, it comes from an idea of I want to feel safe, I want to feel connected, and you have more work to do, or you're putting this mask up, or whatever, that
yeah,
like there was an experience for me where I was getting these signs deeply with my intuition that someone was a huge part in my life and they like were going to be a big part of my life and like see me and it was like significant. And then I saw them in person and they wanted to run away from me. It was like an out of body. They were so turned away. They were so like, it felt like they were disgusted that I existed, like crawling out of their skin, uncomfortable. And it triggered me so much because I was like, I am crazy. Everyone probably thinks I'm crazy. There's people that probably told them I'm crazy. Oh my gosh, I am disgusting. This is exactly it. And I realize now, looking back, that was a literal mirror for me of how I show up when people don't immediately show me everything. I'm a light
mm,
switch. I'm on or off. Here's everything. Here's the trauma. Here's the life. Here's all the parts of me. Here's the goof. Here's the whatever. Or here's the RBF stoic. That's
yeah,
what you get, the protection or you get all of me. And neither one is healthy. And so I've been working on finding the dimmer because it's when you're all in and you're safe and that's fine and whatever. But like it's even when I get to that point of I turn it on and I feel comfortable and I feel good. There were times with my mom where she would accept me and be like, if she was in a good mood, she could tolerate me. But then
yeah,
something happens and it's just
mm,
boom. And then it's just
yeah,
like, ugh. And I can visually see the disgust on her face every time that she's like, oh, Taylor, why are you like this? Why are you
yeah,
this? Why are you so much like your other parent? Why are you this? Like, oh, like you're just repulsive. Like, stop. You're so much. And so I'm always like, even in friendships that I'm close to, if their mood changes even a little bit, I catch myself now, but I used to immediately take responsibility that I did something, I was too much, I was whatever. And my light switch would flip and I would go to cold and I would just be like, well, disconnect, whatever,
mm,
and that would happen over and over and over and over. And it came from how my mom would treat me based on how I would express myself. And so now as an adult, I'm finding that like as I am no longer people pleasing and a chameleon and all of these things, like I used to be so good at socializing. Like I could walk into a room, I could get everyone talking, I could whatever, like I could
Yeah.
light up the room and walk in and just take everyone's attention and boom, 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 make them feel good about themselves. But it was fake. It was people
Yeah.
pleasing. It was really
Mhm.
good at knowing how to act to be what I needed to be for you to make you
Yeah.
feel comfortable and then move across and it was like that in all my relationships that I was this in this relationship, I was this person in this relationship. And I used to fear birthday parties. So I'm like, I'm gonna come together and I'm not gonna know who to be. I don't know
Oh
what to
my
do.
god. That
And
is so true.
yeah, right. And it's like you learn to people please. And now I'm like, hi, I am fully my authentic self. I don't people please anymore. We don't do that. But I don't know how to do that in a safe way. So it's either I protect myself or I am me. And so now I'm like, ooh, that is trauma. So I'm showing up in a different way in a trauma response in relationships now because I'm not faking anymore. And it's like, I say I don't care if I'm liked or accepted. And for the majority of people, I don't, but like people who are important to me, it matters.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So like,
Mhm.
I try and act like it doesn't. And I can like, if you don't like me, whatever, like, move on and it'll hurt, but okay. But the moment that I see a shift, I'm like, ooh, protection. You are not
Yeah.
safe. You do not accept me. You're going to try and change me. You're whatever it is. And then it just shifts. And then I impact the relationship that way. If they're having a bad day, I'm like, oh, you hate me. Okay, bye. Like, and it's sad, but it's I'm like I'm an almost 30-year-old woman and I don't know how to make friends anymore. Hi. Like
But literally you just like that was such a light bulb moment because
yeah,
you're that's exactly it. We don't know how to be in authentic, safe relationships. It's
no.
literally like learning it all over again.
Mhm.
Because even going to school, like that was my favorite place to be as a teen. Like I
Same.
was extremely social and it's because I could just like turn it on. It's like, okay, I'm not home anymore.
Yep.
This is who I am now, and everyone had this very certain idea about who I was.
Mhm.
And it's weird because it didn't necessarily feel fake to me,
Mhm.
but it still was like hiding is still a huge aspect of my life and pretending like nothing was wrong.
Yeah.
And then I carried that into my 20s. And then, there was the drinking Randina and the party Randina, and the whatever, she's crazy, she's so unpredictable. And it was
Mhm.
all of these things that it was like, this is who you are. And
Yep.
I was getting basically that from everyone else because I didn't get it from my mother. I didn't get to find out who I really was. But
Yes.
I feel like you just nailed it, like about saying we don't know how to have those authentic relationships. And I don't do the whole like mood flip thing. I see my husband do that. Like he'll
Yeah.
absorb how people are feeling and it will literally change his mood. But for
Yeah.
me, I it's funny because I can even think back to like sleepovers. Like it was rare that I got to go do stuff, but I would be having the time of my life and then be time to like lay down and go to sleep. And that is the moment. It was like a vulnerable moment to sleep in a room with other
Mhm.
people if you really think about it. And that is when I was like, oh my God, I feel so uncomfortable. I want to go home.
Yeah.
And even though I didn't want to go home, but you know what I mean? Like it was like,
Mhm.
oh, this all this fun and socializing is great. But then when you're literally like, okay, now I'm gonna put on my pajamas. I don't have my cute outfit on anymore. And
Mhm.
now you're gonna wake up in the morning and see me with my messy hair. Like that is an intimate setting.
Mhm.
And now I don't feel comfortable. This intimacy is making me uncomfortable. I do that now. It's like I will have these video chats with a friend or meet up with somebody, and I am like in the moment, really truly being authentic and enjoying it. And then I'll come home and my husband will be like, "How did it go?" I'm like, "Oh, it was great." And then I immediately start getting in my head, like, were
Yes.
they there with me? Did they
Yeah.
feel that like I did? If was I too did I share too much? And I literally ruin it for myself. And that is
Yep.
where I've been recently, like, that has been so hard. And I will literally come home being so excited and feel like my cup is so filled because I spent time with someone. And then I will be bawling by the end of the night and
Yeah.
thinking, like, what is wrong with me?
Mhm. They
And
they
it's
put on
because,
they didn't actually like me. They were just pleasing me. Like they just put up with me or
yeah.
whatever those thoughts that your mom used to tell you, those thoughts come
Hmm.
in, right?
Yep.
Oh, yeah. So relate.
It's so true. So it does affect so much. And it's
Ugh.
really like when you brought up the whole friends thing recently online, I was just like, holy shit, I'm not the only one.
Yeah. That's so hard to talk about. Let me like that is such a
Yeah.
source of shame, such a source of shame. And like I've started to work through that, but like it's also a source of shame because I am pretty much alone. I mean, I'm not fully alone. I do have people, but like I feel very alien because
Yeah.
I have this I have let go of so many people. I have lost close friends just out of nowhere who were like, "Oh, no." And I
Yeah.
was like,
Mm.
"Whoa, what happened?" And like a lot of stuff that happened this year and I've just lost people the last 2 years especially as I've been learning and growing and like some people there's been like falling out, some people there's been like we don't really align anymore. And there's just been like people going out of my life and people who I used to assign so much meaning to just like you can tell it's not it's uncomfortable to be around me because I've changed so much. And I'm like, okay, well, if you don't you're not comfortable around me anymore and like I don't know how to act around you anymore. So like these kind of things just like disconnect. And then I'm
Yeah.
like, well, I can't keep anyone in my life and I don't have my new people here yet. So like what the heck? And then I get so
Hmm.
insecure that it must be me. Everyone else
Yeah.
has someone. It must be me. I think of like those loner losers. Like I'm a loner loser now. And like that's a very teen way of looking at it, but that's where the wound
Yeah.
comes from, right?
Hmm.
And so I'm like, oh, like what does that say about me if? And I have one of those moments too. My mom does not really have friends. She doesn't socialize. She doesn't do anything. Like a friend from high school will come through every few months maybe and say hi. Like she doesn't have people like and so
Hmm.
it's hard for me because I'm like, I am turning into my mother. And it's like one of those realizations like, no, 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 no. But like my mom doesn't emotionally connect. My mom has issues in socializing and that kind of like that's makes so much sense to me. And I look at myself and I'm like, well, if I'm like her, then what is wrong with me? That I don't have people, that I don't have, this support network like I used to, that I don't go out and do anything. It's like me and my dog. Hi, we hang out. Like I don't I don't go out anymore. Like I have few people that I've been gaining new connections with, but like they have deeper friendships, they have other things going on, or they have families, or they have, and it's like, it's you. Where's my people? Where's my soul family?
Hmm.
Where is my romantic partner? Like,
Yeah.
hello. And I'm approaching 30. And so then I think like I just get these insecurities. And, I also, one of the things for my mom is that timelines matter. Like at a certain point, you need to be this way. You need to be here. You need to
Yeah.
do this. You need to, like, and I remember my mom was like, yeah, I had you at this age. So you should be doing this. And I want grandbabies by this and blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, I went the career route. I'm like, no. And also, had I been with the person in my early 20s, even 2 years ago, if I married that person, I would have been miserable. I would have been suppressing parts of me. I wouldn't have been the mother that I know I can be. You know what I mean? It's like I needed the healing. I needed the alignment to, and also whoever my person is needed their own experiences, right? And so it's like when there's so much pressure is to do this, be this, da da da, this is this timeline, you should whatever, like I just compare myself. I'm like, ooh, this is a big milestone. Ooh, what I should be different. I should be in a different place. And like, I don't compare myself much anymore. But those things do come up, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I hear that voice in my head of you should be different by now. Where are my grandkids? Where's this? Where's that? And I'm just like, oh, ew. And I have to constantly redirect those voices. So I'm like, 30 means nothing. The age means nothing. Like,
Hmm.
you know what I mean? It's like it doesn't. It's something to do with it, right? And so I think so many of us that wake up to trauma later in life or start healing later in life, it's like, well, I should have known better. I should have done differently. I should be a certain place because they did things a certain way and they expect this
Yeah.
upon me. And it's like, no, 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 no,
Mm-mm.
that's not it at all. But it's imposed into us, right? And so we either force things that aren't right because we're like, oh, it needs to be, so I'm going to make this fit, or we isolate.
Yeah.
And I've been isolating. So,
Mm.
but not anymore. It's different. But yeah, yeah.
It is this weird thing of like feeling like you literally can't say if you don't have anyone because then you feel like it's saying something bad about you because like where I live, I don't live where I grew up anymore. Like about
Mm-hmm.
8 years ago I moved to another state, and it was to like take on this business venture with some friends I had made online over like a period of 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like the first friends I had really made after my kind of starting my healing journey.
Yeah.
And it was so interesting because they turned out to be also abusive and narcissistic and stuff.
Mm.
And it's just because still was I still was caught in that people pleasing mode and not really seeing all of the signs.
Yep.
And so living here, like I still haven't really met anyone or made friends. And so
Mm-hmm.
like when people like you say that I've got time to video chat or whatever. It's like I don't have it's not like I don't have a life. So obviously I have a family and I have a lot of
Mm-hmm.
things going on, but in regards to socially, I don't. And it's like
Mm-hmm.
the friends I've made now are pretty much just online. I still don't have any in person. And
Yeah.
it's that's okay. Like
Mm-hmm.
we get this idea that by this point, like you said, certain milestones and ages and things, like I should just have this core group of friends, just have these
Mm-hmm.
amazing girlfriends, and we're just so intertwined into each other's lives. And you know, some of us are getting married and some of us are having babies, but it doesn't look like that for every person. And everyone
Nope.
has a very unique path to take in their healing and in
Yep.
their life, whether
Yep.
that involves partners or children,
Mm-hmm.
career, friends. Like that looks different. And I'm so glad that you have started the conversation about it because it has felt shameful in that way of like,
Yeah.
um, feeling like I'm literally like disclosing some huge secret, just telling someone that I don't have any friends where I live.
Yeah. Same.
And it's like embarrassing or something, but it shouldn't
Mm-hmm.
be. It doesn't say anything about
Mm-hmm.
me. Like, my people either aren't here or I haven't found them yet.
Same.
And I have found some that aren't here. And do I wish I had those in-person connections? Yes, but that doesn't define the lovability of me or my ability to connect with people in a real way.
Yep.
So yeah, it is like something that should be talked about more for sure.
I agree. I 100% agree. And, it just, when it shows up that it's different than everyone else, it just confirms that they must be right. All this
Mm,
criticism, all of these things, they must be right. And that's just not true. And I like you, I attracted toxic friendships and things like that for a while because that's where I was too. I
yeah,
was emotionally unavailable. I had these things. I'm like attracts like, right? Like, and also toxic feels like home. So when you're looking
yeah,
for home and you don't realize how much home really is not okay, you step into similar patterns of home, whether that's friendships or relationships or you know what I mean? It's like your nervous system finds comfort in chaos because
yeah,
that's all it's known. So
mm,
that's going to play out in friendships and romantic relationships and whatever until you learn to find that safety and that feels okay instead of sabotaging like, oh no, this must be wrong. Right.
mm,
So I feel very comfortable with where I am now because I know who I am. I love who I am. I'm at the point where like it feels really bad to say, but like I don't miss my mom. I miss the idea of what I thought she was. I don't miss how she treated me. I
mhm,
don't I I was always disappointed of she wouldn't show up that way anyways, especially in my adulthood I really saw it. Like, just like the little comments or I remember I got into a relationship with this guy that she's loved for me for so long. And the first thing she goes, like I'm thinking she's going to be so happy and so excited for me. She's always said you should be with him. First thing she says to me is, "Don't screw that one up." And I'm like,
yeah,
okay. It's like that you can't do that with him. And I'm like, you've always told me like what, and it was just unsupportive from is like, no, you're just gonna screw it up. And
mhm,
it didn't matter what happened. It didn't matter. It was always my fault. It was always this. And so even though I know that narrative is there and I'm constantly reworking that it's my fault or I'm the problem or I'm crazy or I need to be
yeah,
different or I'm not likable or whatever it is, I'm realizing who I am and protecting my peace and stepping forward. And so I'm rebuilding my own life into what I want it to be in a way that is true for my authentic self, for my inner child, for all those parts of me that were hurt, that were criticized, that were made to feel they weren't good enough or forced to be small. And I am allowed to expand into the new possibilities. I am allowed to step into what is meant for me. And those people are starting to show up now because
mhm,
I feel comfortable where I am and have the skills and all the things. And so it's helpful. And so I think to anyone who's there and they're just like feeling alone and struggling, start working on you. Start,
Yeah.
like doing it's hard, but like I hate that it's like you can't love someone until you love yourself. And I don't think that's true. I think that
Yeah.
your love can expand, your relationships can deepen to a way that you're able to love and support and respect yourself. It's not that you're
Mhm.
never going to be loved, it's whatever. It's that you have the capacity to go so much deeper and so much
Yeah.
more vulnerable when you are comfortable with yourself and you trust yourself and you have this your own sense of self-worth because you
Mhm.
set the standard of how people treat you. So
Mhm.
you need to start treating yourself that way first, right? And I think that that is a huge, huge part of the journey that opens up everything. It really does. It
Mhm.
opens up everything. And I think
Yeah.
that's really like, that's what we've been talking about this whole time is like finding yourself, loving yourself, and recognizing the wounds and awareness. But it's the shift, right? It is absolutely the
Mhm.
shift.
Yeah. Completely, because like I feel like if you got those relationships, those healthy relationships when you weren't quite there yet, they wouldn't be you wouldn't have been able to sustain them anyways. And so I try
Yep.
and think about that with the ones that I have now. Like if I had gotten them 5 years ago, even,
Yep.
I wouldn't have been able to be in them the way that I can now. And like you said, like you said, the whole like you can't love people until you love yourself. I also don't agree with that because I think you can definitely, once you do love yourself, you can love well. You can love
Mm-hmm.
in a healthy way.
Mm-hmm.
And you have the ability to love in a way that is giving and not necessarily looking for something back.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we don't love ourselves, then we're looking instead of just being able to give it,
Yep.
you know? And I think that's a big thing. And along with finding self love, I think finding inner safety is
Yeah.
huge because we didn't, like you said, we didn't get that. And I think to create that within ourselves, it makes it safe for us to dive deeper into these areas, dive deeper into our healing and other relationships when they do come up. And it
Mm-hmm.
still is scary, but I think it just gives us the ability. And so I would say learning how to love yourself, like you said, working on yourself, because that's how you'll work through those things to get to those things that you want.
Yeah.
And trying to do it in a way that is out of purely love and wanting to evolve and not out of hating yourself or thinking that you're not enough.
Yeah.
I think it is so important.
I agree. And, that wraps up everything into what we're stepping into in this next year, right? Like,
Mhm.
what's like it literally the things that I'm working on right now. Like, I'm literally starting by the time this will come out, I've already started, but like the new year choose you challenge where it's not I'm not enough. It's not the shame. It's not the judgment. It's who am I? I'm choosing myself. I'm investing in myself. I'm loving myself. I'm caring for myself. Here's compassion. Here's forgiveness. Here's this as I grow and as I learn, not I'm not enough, so I must change who I am, New Year's resolution style, or,
Yeah.
it's different, right? And so that's just so much of who we are. And, when we come from this mother wound of you're not enough, you're the problem, you're wrong, like it pulls us from that. But I think the very simple foundation is starting to treat yourself with kindness and gentleness and compassion and start
Mhm.
treating yourself as someone you love, even if you don't love you yet. It's like
Yeah.
taking those, you know what I mean? Like most of us survivors treat other people really well because we wish we had that, right? So it's like give a
Mhm.
sliver of that to you. And if you're wondering how to do that, like stick around with me because we do that. But like
Yeah.
it's just so important. And I think that message is everything. And I want to thank you so much for having this conversation. I think that it just resonates with so many, myself included, and I know that you and I have a similar story in regard to that. And I'm excited that we can start having these conversations and break these stigmas because
Yeah.
it's so hard to feel shameful and alone in these things and not understand. And, it's just, I love that in this podcast in particular, but especially my guests who are survivors, like we can just share the hard and the messy and the life that is all of the overcoming and dealing with all of our childhood wounds. So Thank you for all of you shared and being vulnerable and all the things. Can you tell people how they can get in touch with you? If you have anything going on, just what they can do to connect and go deeper with you? Because I know they're going to want to.
Um, well, I'm on TikTok and Instagram mostly,
Okay.
at Randina Writes, and I am actually getting ready to release my second book. It's coming out on January 11th.
Okay. So I'll make sure it comes out on that week. That's amazing. Love that.
Very, very excited for that. My first book was a lot about just sharing my story for the first time publicly, and just it kind of takes you through a journey of like my experiences and also just kind of processing it and like
Hmm.
recognizing the mother wound, recognizing the impact that's had on me,
Hmm.
and then the healing that I've gone through too. And the second book is much more like powerful, and you can like see the growth and you can see um like how much my self-belief and my confidence has grown. So the second book is much more about stepping into that power, stepping into that
Mm,
voice, and stepping into what's meant for you, and
love that.
like speaking out in like a confident, unapologetic way. So I'm really excited about that. And I'm just continuing to share my healing and my story and connecting with people on social media. That's been, my biggest uh, goal, I guess, is just
Hmm.
continuing that, because just being a part of the community, seeing other people doing the same thing, that has helped me heal so much. It has meant so much to me. And so just continuing to connect with people and learning from each other, it's just been amazing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And congratulations on all of your accomplishments. And that's just amazing. I know how hard it is to make those things happen sometimes. So that's awesome that you're doing that. Everyone, go check her out, go check out the book. And yeah, I think that about wraps us up. Again, thank you so much for coming. I think this worked out fabulously. And I'm glad that we did this. So, everyone, thank you so much. I hope this helped you in taking steps forward in your overcoming journey and have whatever day feels right to you. Talk to you soon.